Hello, and welcome back to the Near Mint Gideon YouTube channel. I'm Minty, also known as Near Mint Gideon, and today we're talking about Tibalt, Cosmic Imposter, which is my favourite deck from 2021. So when Tibalt enters the battlefield, you get an emblem, which says you can cast spells that he exiles and pay mana as though it was any colour to cast those spells. Now you can play Tibalt as your commander, because he has a backside, which is a creature. Or, I suppose this is his front side, and this is his backside. But he's the creature, so Valky is the creature which you have in your command zone. Tibolt is the backside of that creature, which you can then cast from your command zone. So his emblem ability is really powerful. It basically gives you a second hand, which people can't interact with. So it can't be targeted by discard, it can't be wheeled away. You just have this exile zone that you can constantly cast spells from, so long as you've exiled them with Tibolt. So his +2 is exile the top card of each player's library. So in Commander, which is a multiplayer format, we have 3 opponents and yourself. So that's basically a +2, which is draw 4. Pretty strong. His next ability is -3, so remove 3 loyalty counters from him and exile target artifact or creature. And then his final ability is -8, exile all cards from all graveyards and add 3 red mana. So this second ability gets people quite a lot, because you're exiling it with Tibolt, the artifact or creature. It means you have access to casting it as well, because you've exiled it with him, so your emblem allows him to cast the spell that you've exiled. So if they run their big creature out into it, you can exile it and then cast it for its mana cost on your turn. The other thing that gets people a lot is the emblem allows you to cast the spells even if Tibolt's not on the battlefield. So even if they kill Tibolt, the emblem is still there, so you can still cast the spells that he's exiled from exile. And also, as you cast him, you get more and more emblems, but the amount of emblems doesn't matter, so long as you exile it with a Tibolt, as in this Tibolt, this version of the card. You get access to casting those spells. So it doesn't matter that you're, first time casting your commander, you exiled 3 cards. You still have access to them when you cast your commander for the second time. So that's an important distinction to make. His ultimate is insane. He comes in on 5 loyalty and then pluses to 7 straight away. So technically it should take 2 turns to ultimate. But often, because of the way the deck is constructed, you can get that down to 1. And there's some really interesting situations where if he's at exactly 8 loyalty, some interesting things happen. So if he's at exactly 8 loyalty and you ultimate him, you will remove all of his loyalty counters, and as a state-based action, he will go to the graveyard. But his trigger, here's my hand, that'll be the trigger. His trigger will be on the stack to say exile all cards from all graveyards. So that resolves, he's still in the graveyard, and you exile himself to himself and get the 3 red mana, which means his ultimate, if he's exactly on 8, is crazy, because you have access to him again for 7 mana, and you've got the 3 mana that he just made. So you can cast him again for basically 4 mana, and then he's back on 5 loyalty, and if you uptick him, he'll be on to 7 loyalty again. So if you can get him to exactly 8, some crazy things happen, and people don't realise this, so they will often attack him for, a point of damage to try and keep him off the ultimate. But it's never effective, because as soon as he gets to 8, it's incredibly powerful. His natural progression, though, he starts on 5, you add 2 to that, it's 7, then you add 2 to it again, it's 9. So you need a way of just putting 1 extra counter on him to get to that 8. Now, the 8, I will say, is an overwhelming amount of card draw usually. Like, you exile 20 cards from each person's graveyard. So most of the time, well, I don't know whether that's the used case. I have no idea what the average case is. Sometimes you exile 10, I guess, but if you exile 20, that's not an unreasonable amount of cards that you could exile from an individual graveyard. that means there's 4 players. 20 times 4 is 80 cards, so it's like drawing your whole deck. And it's a deck that you haven't built, or you don't have like a massive amount of knowledge of, so it can be slightly overwhelming, that ultimate, but it's very powerful. And you have access to those cards forever, so I like exiling counter magic with that ability to sort of protect my board, because obviously red and black doesn't have much access to counter magic. So a really interesting deck, really interesting synergies inside the deck. So let's get into the deck tech proper, as we're coming up to like 7 minutes and I've only talked about Tibolt. Jesus, I could talk about this deck all day. I love it. Okay, let's have a look at some of the interesting cards then. I obviously have to include a couple of like mentions that maybe aren't very powerful, but are just really thematic. So I have obviously Tibalt's Trickery in the deck, because it's kind of a Tibolt themed deck, so I had to include it. This spell is quite good. There's some sort of cheap mana cost creatures and artifacts, so you can sort of counter your own thing and flip into something bigger. So that's sort of why it's in the deck. It's also an interesting counter spell just against stuff that your deck finds difficult to deal with, primarily enchantments and stuff like that. So just a good card all round. Well, it sees like CEDH play, so it must be pretty good. But yeah, it has to go in the deck because it's Tibalt's Trickery. Okay, the next section of the deck is just ways of getting Tibolt to 8 loyalty exactly. So, and there's more ways than this. I've just included these things in my deck because I think they're maybe more efficient than the other ways. I'll mention some honourable mentions as well. But so this is all about just getting him to that ultimate, or actually plussing his counters in any way, just to protect him and so on and so forth. But again, we're all about proliferating just once to be able to then have him on 6, uptick him to 8, and then when it comes back around to your turn, you can ultimate him. So the first one is Yawgmoth. I've got this cool old border version of Yawgmoth. I can't remember. Quite a lot of the deck is sort of cool cards, but whether that was silly of me because they're a bit more expensive, I don't know. So Yawgmoth, great. Puts -1/-1 counters on other people's creatures, or I suppose your own creatures if you wanted to, and draws cards when you sacrifice creatures. That's kind of a secondary ability in this deck. The main one we're looking for is this double black, discard a card and proliferate. So proliferate is just, you can choose any number of permanents that are on the battlefield, or players in fact, and you can give them an extra counter of whatever counter they have. So this works perfectly with Tibolt, if I can pick him up. So he's on 5, you discard a card, pay 2 black, he'll be on 6. You have Yawgmoth as a blocker, and then, you can ultimate him the next turn if you want to. Again, whether you want to or not is up for debate, because it's, as I say, slightly overwhelming. Okay. Nesting Grounds, an interesting card in this deck because there's going to be a fair amount of Planeswalkers in the deck. It's kind of got a Super Friends sub-theme because of all the proliferate and stuff like that. So this just allows you to move a counter from a target permanent you control onto another target permanent. So you move one of your loyalty counters from a Planeswalker with more loyalty than Tibolt or whatever, and put it on Tibolt. Forge of Heroes, again, it's just a colourless land, but this is the ability that we're looking at here. Basically, if a commander entered the battlefield this turn, you can tap it and add a loyalty counter to that Planeswalker, or a +1/+1 counter to a creature. But I don't care about the creature side of my commander. I only care about Valky. So that's the creature side, Charlie. I mean, I only care about the Planeswalker side, so which is Tibolt. So I've just tapped this, put another counter on him. Perfect. 1 extra counter. Excellent. Gets us into that natural progression to 8. Chandra, Acolyte of Flame. Again, a Planeswalker herself. Her abilities are quite relevant. All of them actually quite relevant. The first one says, put a loyalty counter on each red Planeswalker you control. So that puts a loyalty counter on her, and Tibolt is a red Planeswalker too, so he gets a loyalty counter. Create 2 Her next ability is create 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens, and they die at the end of turn, basically. But you can sack them to stuff like Yawgmoth, or some other sack outlets in the deck as well, so you can get some advantage from that. And then finally, this is actually really relevant. You may cast a instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard, and it will be put in, if it would be put into the graveyard, it gets put into exile. So that -2 is gets something back from your graveyard, gets a converted mana cost 3 or less instant or sorcery from your graveyard, which can be relevant. There's a couple in the deck. The main thing we're looking at here is this first ability, and also the fact that she will come in on quite a lot of loyalty. She's 3 mana, comes in on 4. The Nesting Grounds interaction as well helps, so you can move counters from her onto other Planeswalkers. Again, cheap Planeswalkers are pretty good in the deck because of some other cards as well that we'll get onto. Khan's Bastion, or Khan's Bastion, if you are a fan of Game of Thrones. Just 4 mana Proliferate, fairly straightforward, adds an extra counter to Tibolt. The Elder Spell is one of the reasons why you want cheap Planeswalkers, because if you can sort of flood the board with Planeswalkers, then you can cast the Elder Spell for just 2 black, and destroy any number of target Planeswalkers, then choose a Planeswalker you control, and put 2 loyalty counters on it for each Planeswalker destroyed this way. So if you have, I don't know, 2 Planeswalkers out, well, 2 Planeswalkers and Tibolt, I suppose, you destroy both of them, you put a whole bunch of counters on Tibolt. A whole bunch, I mean 4, yeah, that's good. And then, you know, he's closer to ultimate and stuff like that. It doesn't necessarily put the one you want, but it does just drop a load of counters onto Planeswalkers. Again, there's a Planeswalker sub-theme, so, you know, dropping a load of counters onto some of the other Planeswalkers is pretty good. And then I've got a couple of things just to sort of, these are kind of ramp in the deck, almost, just to reduce the cost of Tibolt, and, well, sort of, Command Beacon basically puts, Tibolt can get quite expensive if he dies a lot, so sacrificing this to put Tibolt in my hand is very good, and then I can cast him for just 7 mana. Sanctum of Eternity, again, I can just tap 2 and return Tibolt to my hand. This basically gives you, if you've got a lot of mana, it gives you 2 activations of Tibolt in 1 turn, or it allows you to exile something, for instance, with his -3, and then pick him up and recast him later on to get him back up on loyalty, so that he's not in danger of just dying straight away. So I guess this is sort of like an interesting include. I don't know whether I don't think it's the most efficient thing in the world, but it's certainly something to look at if you're building a Tibolt deck. I think the next stuff is just sort of interesting interactions. So those are just like put counters on Tibolt, make Tibolt cheaper type thing. Keep his loyalty high, I suppose, is the gist of that. Here, I'm just looking at basically interesting interactions. The first one's Command the Dreadhorde, as I said before. Loads of Planeswalkers in the deck, so when they die, if you've got a big graveyard full of Planeswalkers, you can just reanimate all of them and pay life equal to their total converted mana cost. So that's good. Yeah, you know, it doesn't work with, it's a bit of a nombo with Tibolt, because in the graveyard he is actually Valky, not Tibolt. So you couldn't get Tibolt back with this, but you can get all your other Planeswalkers back. So it's a very powerful spell, and you know, a good piece of mass Planeswalker reanimation, which doesn't really exist. I can't think of another card. Maybe Primeval's Glorious Rebirth. That'll shoot up. There'll be a little, and there's a Primeval's Glorious Rebirth here. Yeah. We'll do that. So next card, Reality Scramble. Really interesting. I saw a Legacy video about this. Sorry about the jump cuts. I'm like coughing like mad for some reason. I saw a Legacy video about this. You basically target a really cheap Planeswalker, and there's some cheap Planeswalkers in the deck. You've seen one already with this spell. And you put that permanent on the bottom of your library, and then you reveal cards from the top of your library until you hit a card type. My god. You hit a permanent that shares a card type with the permanent you put on the bottom of your library. So the idea of this is that you shoot your own baby Tibolt, which is in the deck, or Chandra, which you just saw, and you will only hit a Planeswalker. You won't hit anything else, because obviously they only have one permanent type. They have Planeswalker as their permanent type. So you keep going until you hit another Planeswalker. So that can be really powerful. If you have a couple of big Planeswalkers in your deck, you can just spin into the bigger ones by shooting the smaller ones. So I saw a Legacy video about this. It's quite interesting. It also has Retrace, so if you've got any sort of spare lands in your hand, you can just ditch them to recast it. So, interesting. It also doesn't have to hit Planeswalkers. It can hit stuff like the treasures made from Stormkilled Artist. Again, this is a include that I don't know where I'm sitting with it. There's some instants and sorceries in the deck, and you obviously exile other people's libraries, so you might exile instants and sorceries from them as well. So he could get really big and make a load of treasures for you, potentially. So, there's an artifact sort of sub-theme as well. So I don't know where I sit with this guy, but I think he's pretty good. He's been quite effective. There's kind of a stormy element of the deck as well, so he kind of fits with that, not just because of his name, but because every time you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you are going to make a treasure token. Prosper, he's pretty good. Makes treasure tokens when you cast stuff from exile, or play stuff from exile. So Tibolt obviously exiles stuff, so Prosper makes a treasure every time you cast a Tibolt spell. He also is a little bit of card draw as well. Again, interesting interaction. Not sure how powerful it is, but it's interesting. He's got Death Touch as well, and he's a 1/4, so he's quite a good blocker. Again, Planeswalker decks like having good blockers. Wild Magic Sorcerers, again, just some more sort of exile tribal stuff. So when you cast your first spell from exile, it has Cascade. So again, stuff Tibolt exiles is exiled when you cast it. So when you cast the first spell from Tibolt, it cascades. And there's a couple of stuff that you can cascade into, which is interesting. Scheming Symmetry is just a really great card in this deck. It's basically a Vampiric Tutor? No, the other one, Demonic Tutor, because it puts a card on top of your library, but with Tibolt out, you can then exile that card. The downside of this card is that another player does it as well, but if they're not paying attention, and they would have to be pretty slow to, I don't want to criticise people, but if you get got by this, watch out for it, I suppose. Scheming Symmetry obviously puts a card on top of your deck, but also puts a card on top of someone else's deck, and then you can exile the top card of each player's library with Tibolt. So if they don't put something useless on top of their deck, that's quite powerful if they miss this, but they should know not to do that. So it basically turns into a one-sided tutor. So they put a land on top of their deck, you put, I don't know, one of your combo pieces, who knows, another Planeswalker, whatever you want on top of your deck, you exile it with Tibolt, and then you exile whatever they tutored for as well, which they should just get a land, I think, is the correct play. I can't think of anything else, maybe like something that's really bad for Tibolt to cast, who knows, I don't know. We're onto a new section, again, God, we're racing through this, 20 minutes I've already been talking about this deck, Jesus. I've got both other Tibolts in the deck. This is definitely not a power level choice. It's just thematic, isn't it? And one of the goals I have with the deck is to try and get all three Tibolts out at the same time, so they can do that Spider-Man thing where they look at each other and go, "You what?" So they're okay. I mean, they're not amazing. This second ability I'm not even going to read because it's not very good. I like the fact that this is draw a card and then discard a card at random. There's some graveyard recursion, you've seen some already, so, that can actually be good. It's a little bit uncontrollable, but I quite like that. If you get him to 6, though, his ultimate is basically Insurrection, so that's really good. That can win games, so, I don't know. It's Tibolt, so you have to, I think. Tibolt, Rakish Investigator, or whatever. Investigator? Instigator? Oh, Instigator, right, fair enough. Your opponents can't gain life. Again, not massively relevant, but the Devils are quite good. They block for your other Planeswalkers. They get sacked to Tevish. Again, Tevish, if you don't know what this does, I don't know, maybe you've lived under a rock for the past year. Well, it shouldn't be so insulting, my god. +2, make 2 black thralls. +1, sacrifice a creature. If it's your commander, you creature or planeswalker. If it's your commander, you get to draw 3. If it's not, you get to draw 2. So, again, there's a load of little tokens that are made by your other planeswalkers. You can sack them to draw cards. Pretty good. His ultimate is also completely devastating and very complicated to do in VEDH. In fact, this whole deck is pretty difficult to pilot in VEDH, but I'm going to have a tip about that maybe coming out in a short or something. Lolth, Spider Queen, I got a foil one before the price went mad. Again, just makes little bodies with her -3. Also draws you some cards. That's kind of useful. I'll talk about that later, but just drawing a card is pretty good. And then whenever a creature dies, you get to put a counter on her. Her ultimate is kind of cool as well. A little bit complicated to explain, but basically, whenever a player takes damage, if they haven't lost 8 life, they lose life equal to the difference. So, you know, you hit someone with a 1/1 and they don't take 1, they take 8. So, again, probably doesn't come up quite a lot in this deck because, again, the creature count's so low, but interesting anyway. Duretti, he's really good because of the artifact sub-theme. Pulling artifacts out of your graveyard with his -2, sacrifice an artifact, and then return an artifact from your graveyard to the battlefield. He also, again, drawing a couple of cards is pretty good with his +2. And again, you can defend him, you can get into ultimate as well. I don't often use the ultimate on this one, but basically whenever an artifact is put in your graveyard, you get to return it to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. I'm mainly using him for these two. In fact, this top one comes in really useful just to try and hit lands, put artifacts that you don't want in your graveyard for reanimation later. Liliana in the Dark Realms, I am trying to ultimate this one. Good for searching lands. +1, just find a swamp from your deck, basically. And then -6, your swamps add 4 black mana. So really good in the deck. There's quite a lot of swamps. There's also an Urborg. So you can, I do want to ultimate Liliana. I think it's quite realistic as well. People don't think it's very threatening, just finding a swamp every turn and then all of a sudden it's on 6 loyalty and they can't deal with it. And again, you've got a load of ways of putting extra counters on it. So the ultimate here is really important. The -3 is pretty good as well, just acting like a little bit of removal if you need it to be. It's pretty good. I really like this Chandra too. Again, making some bodies which you can sack to some of the sack outlets. The main thing you want to do is wheel here, so discard all the cards in your hand and then draw that many +1. Pretty good effect in red. Just get rid of a bunch of lands or whatever you've got in hand and then draw into some fresh stuff. And then a push, she can also act as a board wipe as well. So there's been times where I've pumped her loyalty loads with an Elder Spell or something just to wipe the board. You're in bad shape if that's the line you're taking, but you know, interesting as well. Just sort of 6 mana, bit of board control. Ugin, because Ugin. I got this nice copy of Ugin the other day, so it's not foil, unfortunately, but it is the cool alternative art. I really like this art. If you don't know what Ugin does, you haven't played Standard recently. Oh, he's rotated out now. God, I'm behind the times. Basically, says, when he comes down, he says, do you know that game you just played? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to start it, but I'm in front. Start it again, but I'm in front. Yeah, he's got a +2, deals 3 damage to any target. 3 damage to any target, and then -X is the thing that you run it for because it's basically a board wipe. Just basically exile each permanent with converted mana cost. X or less that's more than 1 colour, so it doesn't hit lands or artifacts, but hits everything else. And then his ultimate is like the classic ultimate that wins you the game, basically. -10, gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, put 7 permanents from your hand into the battlefield. So he's pretty good. I don't know if you knew that. He's pretty good. Sarkhan's an interesting one. There's a lot of planeswalkers in the deck, and his +1 turns them all into dragons, which is kind of cool. So you can get in with your planeswalkers. I'm looking to get a foily version of this, which shouldn't be too expensive. And then his -3 makes a big blocker. So if you don't have many Planeswalkers out, you can always -3 him, and then and he's got some relevant text about basically whenever a creature attacks a Planeswalker you control, each dragon you control deals 1 damage to that creature. So it kind of pings down smaller creatures from attacking your Planeswalkers, which is kind of relevant. The main thing is I want a big board full of Planeswalkers, and I want to smash face with them all being dragons. Chandra, bit of ramp, bit of removal, exiles the top card of your library. Again, we're going to talk about why that's kind of important. I've been saying drawing a card and exiling the top card of your library is kind of important, but we'll talk about that later. Her -7's very good as well, so if you can get her to that. Because again, there's a bit of a storm aspect to the deck, so just pinging stuff for 5 damage is pretty good as well. Wow, we've got so much to get through. Holy moly. Liliana. Very relevant static ability. Creature you control dies, draw a card. Loads of creatures in the deck dying because of the tokens and stuff. So she also makes tokens to block. Her -4 is really impactful. Everyone sacrifices 2 creatures. If you sacrifice 2 creatures as well, you get to draw 2 cards. Really good. And then her -9, each basically is like a cataclysm, like a black cataclysm. Each opponent chooses is it called Cataclysm? Yeah, I think it is. Chooses a permanent they control of each type and sacrifices the rest. So they get 1 land, 1 artifact, 1 Planeswalker, 1 creature, 1 enchantment. Is that it? Yeah. So they're left with basically nothing if you ultimate this. It can be quite miserable for your opponents if you do that. Most people scoop, but if they stick around, this deck doesn't actually win very fast. So it can be pretty miserable if you get to that. I try and avoid that one. Liliana, main thing here, putting stuff on top of your library. So she's a tutor effect, but specifically the top of the library is really, really good. Basically other abilities don't matter, but that -2 is really good. Because again, top of your library, Tibolt cares about it, but also so does something else in the deck, which we'll get to. Ugin, again, making colourless spells, cost 2 less, very impactful. Lots of artifacts in the deck, which we'll get to, because there's a lot of ramp in the deck. But also just drawing a permanent, also just drawing a card, basically, making a 2/2. It's a little creature you can sack, and you get the card. Oh my god, I'll explain it properly. Exile the top card of your library, and create a colourless 2/2 spirit. And when that spirit dies, you get the card that you exiled from the top of your library. Again, manipulating the top of your library, important because of the special surprise I'm getting to later on. And then -3, destroy a permanent that's more than 1 colour. So good at pinging enchantments as well. Also static, very good. Lots of artifacts. You get the gist. Professor Onyx, again, there's a few instants and sorceries, so this does come up. The Magecraft ability. The board control's really good. Each opponent sacrifices a creature with greatest power among creatures that player controls. And then filtering, just removing cards from the top of your library, again, is pretty good too. Filling your graveyard's not too bad in this deck as well. And the ultimate is backbreaking. Each opponent may discard a card. If they don't, they lose 3 life. Repeat this process 6 more times. So you get to kill people. Okay, so that's the Planeswalker package. Now we're on to just ramp. I've got Lotus Bloom, mainly because this is just a cool looking card. But also you can discard it to various effects. You can put it into your graveyard and reanimate it with Duretti or some of the other effects in the deck. So it's a pretty cool card. I don't know whether it's particularly good you can also suspend it for 0, at the beginning of your, couple of first turns. It might be pretty good. I don't know whether it should be in the deck or not. I just really like the foiling on the card and stuff like that. I think it is good. I think, yeah, I'm leaning towards it is good, because you put it in your graveyard and reanimate it with some effects. But if you exile it to Tibolt, it's completely useless. So, who knows? Maybe that shouldn't be in the deck. I'm sort of on the line on whether it should be or not. But if you get it down, it's really good ramp. It's a Black Lotus if you get it down. So, you just have to jump through some hoops. Mana Crypt, obviously. I've got this cool version of it though, so, you know, cash money right there. Liquid Metal Talk, this is really cool, and again, I'm going to have to talk about flipping about this for like 5 minutes and 30 minutes into this video, Jesus Christ. Basically, a mana rock at face value, but also you can turn a permanent into an artifact with this. Sorry, not a permanent, a non-land permanent into an artifact with this. That means that you can turn an enchantment into an artifact and then exile it with Tibolt's -3 and then cast it. Maybe that's bad, maybe that's a good interaction, but it's certainly interesting if there's a problematic enchantment or enchantment that you're like, oh, I like the look of that one, like a Zendikar Resurgence or something. I'm gonna nab it off you. So maybe you want to run this. Rakdos Signet, obviously, just ramp. Ironcrag Feet, very good, gets you to Tibolt quite quickly. The only thing is you need black available as well, but still pretty good. Ramp, a bit of a nombo though with some of the other stuff because you want to be casting multiple spells a turn, but just getting to Tibolt for 4 mana or for 5 mana is pretty good, just reducing the cost of Tibolt. Goblin Welder, another way of pulling artifacts out of the graveyard. Mox Opal, Clock of Omens. If you haven't seen this one before, tap 2 untapped artifacts and then untap an artifact. So you tap this and something else, or treasure tokens or whatever things you've got lying around, and you can untap some of your really big mana rocks that are in the deck. Really good ramp, sort of storm style card. If you're doing like an artifact storm thing. In fact, it's a completely underrated card. Go and buy like 5 of these. They're great in basically every deck that has any amount of artifacts and big artifact mana. Just like buy 10. Go and buy 50. No, don't buy that many because I like that it's cheap. Solemn Simulacrum, cool old border one. Wish it was foil, but that's like lots of money. Just a good creature that dies when you need it to draw your card and also gets your land out of your deck. Moonsilver Spear, I played this the other day and it's absolutely great. Gets you a land or gets you any of your mana rocks for just 3 mana investment. Pretty good, that one. Jeska's Will, obviously, because I'm a horrible person, just adds tons of mana. If you control your commander, you get to exile the top 3 cards of your library as well. I don't care about that. Sort of, I do, maybe, I don't know. It's just really good for getting tons of mana. You play this on turn 3, you usually get 7 mana from your opponent's hand, and, you know, 7 mana, that's a number for Tibolt. Again, you need a black available, but it's still just a crazy card. Dockside Extortionist, again, enters the battlefield, makes treasures equal to the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponents control. Probably should have had less words in the text box on that card, and I could see people just not playing this because it's a horrible card for horrible people, including me. Again, Talisman of Indulgence, just a cool little bit of 2 mana ramp. Mox Talisman, not sure if this is a good card, but it's a cool foil, so I put it in the deck. Again, you can discard it to some of your discard effects and reanimate it with some of your reanimation effects. If you exile it to Tibolt, you will be sad, but I do quite like it, just because it's a foil, and, you know, maybe it's good, I don't know. Tran Dynamo, best mana ramp in Magic, I'm not sure that's the case. Sol Ring's probably the best one, I've got this promo version. Manifold Key, untaps another artifact, so you can untap some of your big mana rocks, make more mana. Arcane Signet, Chromatic Orrery is in the deck. Again, there's a lot of like 7 mana matters, and also the making, basically spending colourless mana as though it's any mana is really good, because you can do that with Tibolt already, but you can't do it with your own deck, so it's kind of cool to do that, and it untaps with all the untap effects. There's lots of ways of getting to specifically 7 mana, so casting this is insane. It is obviously a big target for removal, but it's kind of, I don't know, it's just a cool, I really like it. So I know it's done lots of work in the past. You don't have to run it, obviously, you don't have to run anything that I'm saying, you don't have to be here. I'm not forcing you to be here, but I like it. Ornithopter of Paradise, it blocks and it ramps. Mana Vault, it ramps. Very good. Pings you for damage. Watch out for that. Don't untap it on your turn. I have to keep reminding myself not to do that. Bedevil, just sort of some catch-all single target removal. Vandal Blast, again, more removal. We're on the removal part of the deck now, or board control. I got this foily in Garrick's Wake. This probably could be a cheaper mana spell for a similar effect, but I just like the fact that this is a foil in Garrick's Wake, and it also blows up Planeswalkers, which I like about that. So, not the most efficient card in the deck, but a cool card nonetheless. Toxic Deluge, again, just a 3 mana board wipe. You can pay X life and give creatures -X, -X. Here's a card that I'm trying out. I make a lot of mana in this deck, so casting this guy means that I can choose either, because he's got an X in his cost, I can choose either to give everything -X, -X until the end of turn and lose X life, a bit like a very expensive Toxic Deluge, or I can reanimate X creatures with total converted mana cost X or less from my graveyard. There's not that many creatures in the deck, but reanimating, and they gain haste as well, but reanimating like a Solemn is pretty good, and I can't think of anything else that's pretty good. Oh, Goblin Welder is alright. It's also just a huge trampling flyer that wipes the board, so it's good in this deck. You want a lot of board control, because creatures are going to threaten your Planeswalkers. This one, Reckless Endeavour, pretty good again. I'm sort of testing it out, but you roll 2d20s. 2d20s? No, 2d12s. Which, who has a d12? My god. Is that is that a thing? Anyway, you roll 2d12s, and then you choose one of the results to be the amount of damage you deal to each creature, and one of the results to be the amount of treasures you make. So, usually you get your mana cost, if the average is 2 6s, I don't know what the maths is on that, but if the average is 2 6s, you get 6 treasures and 6 damage to each creature. So, I think that's pretty good. Commander's really fast nowadays. I don't think you need Blasphemous Axe levels of damage most of the time. I think most of the time 6 damage will kill most of the creatures on board. So, pretty good, and I found that the ramp is helpful too. This is one that I'm trying out too. Cunning Rhetoric. It's basically a God, what's card called? Propaganda, or Ghostly Prism type effect, except this one is better, I think, because people don't like having their stuff stolen. So basically it says whenever an opponent attacks you or a Planeswalker you control, they have to flip the top card of their library into exile, and then you can cast that card for as long as it remains exiled. So this often deters people from attacking you at all, which is crazy, because you'll have like an active Planeswalker and they're like, I don't want to lose literally just the top card of my library. Even though if Tibolt's out, yeah, people are sad about that card, but it's good, very good in this deck. I think I'm on to the things that I'm just sort of trying out now. I think that was the first one. I've sort of tried to stack the deck in that order. Wow, this is such a long video, Jesus. Burning Rune Demon, just a tutor effect. Except it's kind of like cool, because you get to, get your players in the game interacting in your deck, because they have to make choices, but you can often be political about this. So basically you tutor for 2 cards that don't share a name or aren't called Burning Rune Demon, and then a player puts one of them into your hand and the other into the graveyard. So kind of like a fact or fiction tutor. Again, just trying it out. It's a big flyer as well. Big flyers are good for blocking other flyers and smaller creatures that might try and get in at your Planeswalkers. Fevered Suspicions. I'm not sure this card's good, but it's certainly cool. Each player exiles from the top of their library until they exile a non-land non-land card. And then you may cast those spells without paying their mana cost. And it happens twice, because it has rebound. So it happens once when you cast it, and once on your upkeep. So you basically get to steal a load of stuff from your opponents. Again, it kind of fits with the sort of exile theme as well. I'm just trying it out. Don't know whether it's very good. I think it might be. I think it's good if you can get it off. It's just a lot of mana, isn't it? So, who knows? Flexible thing. I'm also trying out this. I think this is good. Volcanic Torrent. There's a lot of artifacts, a lot of storm, a lot of cascade in the deck. This cascades, it's 5 mana, and then it also deals X damage to each creature and planeswalker opponent's control, where X is the number of spells you cast this turn. So if you just cast this, it's 2 damage to everything. If you cast a couple of spells beforehand, it gets exponentially better. And I think, you know, in this deck, there's Cascade, you get loads of card advantage with Tibolt. I think you could be casting, you know, from turn 5, you could be casting this and 3 other spells. So you're definitely like doing 5 damage. Well, not definitely, I suppose, but I think it's good. I think it's good. I've been playtesting it a bit, and I think it is actually really good. The fact that it doesn't hit your planeswalkers is really excellent. One-sided stuff, very good. Flamefield Herald. Your commander is 7 mana, and this gives your commander Cascade. On the stack, he's 7 mana, so this cascades for 7. I think there'll be some confusion there a little bit, but Tibolt is 7 mana on the stack, not 2 mana, so you get to cascade for 7, which is pretty good. Again, you can cascade into those 0 mana cards like Lotus Bloom and Soul Talisman. Or you can cascade into basically your whole deck. There isn't actually that much stuff above 7 mana in the deck, so pretty good. Pretty cool card. Here's 2 dragons that I'm testing out. I think this one is the better of the 2. Manaform Hellkite, there's a lot of non-creature spells in the deck. Just making your non-creature spells into damage, I think is pretty good, which is what this does. You basically, every time you cast a non-creature spell, you get an XX Dragon Illusion creature token with flying and haste, and you can bash your opponents with it, and then it goes away at the end step. This is definitely a much more experimental card, but it is a foil, so I'm a sucker for foils. And it says, whenever you cast a spell, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw a card for each of that spell's colours. And you might think, Minty, this is just terrible in your deck, and it might be, I don't know. But you have a second hand with Tibolt, full of potentially multicoloured spells, because you're using your opponent's deck. So theoretically, you could chuck your hand away and draw cards equal to the colours of other people's spells, is kind of the theory. I'm not sure whether it's very good, but it's also, again, just moving cards off the top of your deck constantly, which I think has some value in this deck because of this. Oh, I've put this in the wrong order. Great. Because of this combo, which is in the deck. Again, I don't tend to go for it straight away. There's obviously tutors in the deck, so I could go for it quite quickly, but it's kind of a break glass in case of emergency kind of combo, which is it a combo? Because it's not actually it's not deterministic, so maybe it's the worst type of combo. Who knows? I've got this foil old border Bolus's Citadel and this Aetherflux Reservoir. Now the combo is basically Bolus's Citadel allows you to pay life to get rid of cards off the top of your library and cast them. I don't know why I said get rid of, but cast them. And Aetherflux Reservoir says you gain life equal to the amount of spells you've cast this turn every time you cast a spell. So the combo is you look at the top, you cast the spell, and you gain the life back. And that's why throughout the whole deck you saw loads of Planeswalkers that care about just getting cards off the top of your library, including Tibolt. This means you can clear lands out of the way quite effectively, and also the things that tutor to the top of the library are really good because then you can keep the combo going and not run out of gas. And then this is one of the reasons why I play this, is because you cast the spell from your hand or from the top of your library, you check whether it's a land, and then you can use that ability to just clear the land out of the way. Because the issue is, the only reason this fizzles is because you hit a land, you play that land, and then you hit another land, and you can't play another land, so you have to get rid of the lands off the top of your deck somehow. So there's loads of Planeswalkers in the deck that do that, and also draw effects like this. Also, Yawgmoth helps as well. So there's overlapping synergy with this. If you get these 2 pieces on the board, you usually win. And the deck is built so you don't usually fizzle. Underworld Breach helps with these combos. Also just reanimates Planeswalkers and stuff like that from the graveyard. Casts lots of spells each turn. Just an insane card. I should probably read it for those people who don't know what it is. Each non-land card in your graveyard has Escape, which basically means you can cast it and exile 3 cards from your graveyard to cast it. So you can cast any spell from your graveyard so long as you can exile 3 cards from your graveyard whilst this is out. So usually you're exiling lands and stuff you don't care about. Again, a little bit of filtering in Faithless Looting. I've got this triggering art. I really like it though, actually. I saw it and I was like, oh my god, I'm not a fan of that, but then it grew on me and I really like it now. And the foil version is great. And anyone who says it's bad is, well, that's your opinion, I suppose. Thrill of Possibility, again, just a bit more filtering. And finally, Demonic Tutor to tutor for things that you might want to play with this game. Not usually for the combo, just for stuff that you like to play with. Then I've got a bunch of lands. The only interesting ones here, well, they're all interesting for one reason, but the interesting ones here are Urborg, Nykthos, and Interplanar Beacon. Interplanar Beacon basically says whenever you cast a Planeswalker spell, you gain a life, and also filters to help you make mana for Planeswalker spells. Gaining a life is good with Bolus's Citadel. It's also good with Command the Dreadhorde as well, so gaining a little bit of life. It can be impactful. I've got quite a lot of Planeswalkers in the deck, so that's pretty good. Urborg works well with Liliana, as I said before. You can have quite a large board state of like black and red Planeswalkers, so Nykthos can make quite a lot of mana sometimes. I've got this Haunted Ridge, which is foily and awesome, so that's pretty cool. Valakut Awakening, Hagra Mauling just as MDFCs. Yeah, that's fine. And then I think the rest is just kind of basic lands. People are like going to watch this and be like, why has he got some of those lands in his deck? And why has he picked those lands? And that's because I've got 2... No, I thought I had 2 command towers. I didn't. All of the basics and some of the other lands are from the Tibolt versus Sorin Planeswalker duel deck, which makes me laugh every time I see it, so that's why I've got these weird basics. I actually want the basics from the new Unfinity set, like everyone else does, because I am a basic boy, but they are cool because they're planets and he's a cosmic imposter. Oh god, synergies. Great, yeah, that's the deck. I've only been talking for 50 minutes. If you like what you see here, subscribe and like the video. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, you are a soldier and a trooper. Well done. If you want to see more of the stuff that I do, you can follow me on Instagram @NearMintGideon. You can follow me on Twitter @NearMintGideon. I don't post on Twitter very much, but I do post on Instagram occasionally, and I post my artwork there as well. So if you want to see some artwork, very amateur artwork, you can follow me there. I know about this card. Cool. See you soon. Lots of love. Bye.